Good evening, Thomas.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Uh-oh, let me make sure. I'm showing them.
Are you muted maybe?
No? Still not hearing me?
Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3.
I'm hearing you.
Okay, I think,
Can you hear me?
yeah, sorry, yeah. Okay, enough. Testing. There. Yeah, I switched the audio for a different meeting earlier, but Zoom didn't catch the fact that I was on the, it was looking at the wrong speakers. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, no problem at all. I said at a Board of Ed meeting last week, some people say I'm at my best when I'm unmuted.
Yeah, I've heard similar sentiments directed at me. But okay, there we go. Okay. All right.
Hey, Paul. Chris,
Hey, Christine. Hi, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
Good evening, everybody.
good evening, sir.
Yeah, come on.
You ready for a blizzard, Paul?
No,
Me either.
I'm not. I did get my truck back today, or one of them, but I don't need the blizzard.
No,
No, not at all. No, it's my fault. I was just talking the other day about how not so bad it's been, a couple inches at a time, and
You did it.
it's been
that'll
cold,
teach
but
you.
not a lot of precipitation. So yeah, I know. I should have known. I think the better question is for Joe. Is he ready for the blizzard?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm kind of entertaining. Maybe I should go down and get some eggs and bacon and things
Oh,
for the
I'm
station.
sure there's a
you
rush.
gonna go get milk and bread?
Well,
Eat the rush?
yeah, just in case I'm stuck and we're gonna be at the station.
I'll be here.
Oh,
Mostly because I know Charlie won't be. So
yeah, well, yeah, that was sort of a given.
yeah. Yeah, talked about that today too.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, Bill,
Chuck, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
That's good.
Hey, Chuck, good to see you.
How are you?
Not too bad. I did see you on the side of the road the other day, but I didn't realize it was you as I was zinging by.
Yep, no worries.
Hi, Chuck. Happy New Year. It's Greg.
How are you, Craig?
Good.
Good. Happy New Year to you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Christine.
Hi.
I'm being paid. Bad traffic on the way here, Bill. There you go. How's your day?
Crazy. Like they all do. Unless I'm mistaken, I think we're all here.
No, we're missing Jim Rupert.
Oh,
I think I saw
Jim's
him.
here.
Jim's here.
Oh, there's
How
Joe.
how could you miss Jim? Joe just joined
I'll
us.
give him a call.
All right, well, I've got 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. And just a quick overview. I believe that all members of the committee are present. Is that right, Chris, now?
I'm calling Jim.
Jim is here.
Are you? Here.
I see him.
Confusion.
I see him.
I see him.
Here you are. Bye.
Uh,
Well, anyway, what I wanted to do, as you know, we put out a request to all of our departments and everything to come up with their proposed for possible consideration before this committee, projects. And unlike we've done in past years, I've asked everybody to include everything they could think of. Basically, because my concern is we have a habit of deferring things and being surprised a year or two down the road. And I'd rather we at least knew there were certain things that are on the horizon or under consideration that we ought to be aware of. So that's why I've asked Joe to put a number of the projects he's working on or would like to be working on the table. And I've done the same with Craig. What my thought is, what you have not seen is things that the Board of Selectmen have been setting aside for possibilities for projects under the ARPA funds. Mainly because it's a different funding source than generally what we're talking about here. And also the fact that there are some of these items on the ARPA potential list that I would prefer to get into action sooner rather than later, waiting for a town budget to be passed or whatever. And so that was my logic why, and what I'd like to do, and not necessarily at this meeting, but then highlight potential ARPA funding, potential bonding issues, and then potential issues that we're going to try to bring forward before the Board of Finance and the town for vote under next year's budget. Anybody have any questions or anything regarding that or input? Chuck, you're an old hand at this. You had any thoughts along those lines?
The only thing I'm thinking, just to get a sense, I think a number of the items that I saw, I think are so just as a reminder, this board is an advisory board to the Board of Selectmen. So all we are is sort of helping the Board of Selectmen review projects and you know, offer input where we think it may be needed. And hopefully what we're doing is we're helping the Board of Selectmen pare down the projects to something that we think the Board of Finance will be able to present to the public to pass it within the budget. So I just wanted everybody, you know, to know that that's sort of what this board is really supposed to be doing. So to that end, one of the things, and Bill, you touched on it for sure. There seems to me to be several things in here in the packet that I picked up that probably aren't pertinent necessarily to this board or to this meeting. And I think part of what we would want to be dealing with is, and all of this is particularly under the school, and also we have the school building committee. It seems to me there's many of these items here that probably should fall under some sort of larger bonding package to really handle a lot of it all in one shebang, which in my estimation, and again, I'm not setting up the chart that we're putting in front of the public, but in my estimation, that stuff that should be set aside, dealt with by that particular committee, which is also an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen, to help. So that would be my 2 cents in sort of culling a lot of the things that this specific committee is dealing with. The only other thought I have is I don't know what the Board of Finance did at the end of the audit process as far as taking a look at what kind of funding that we would be able to push into CNR. So I know for me personally, when I'm looking at these projects, I'd like to know what's in CNR because as you all remember, when I was on that board, I really was worried about, you know, the erosion of CNR. And so we would try to, you know, keep that in mind as we were reflecting on the projects that we deem necessary.
I did some rough calculations and I consulted with Cheryl earlier this evening. And as it sits right now, we've got about $459,000 in CNR remaining funds. That's without any new appropriations or from the Board of Finance or whatever, but that's our balance to start with as it is right now.
So Bill, you said 400 and what thousand?
59,000
59,000. And what I'm wondering is, does
and
we
change.
have,
I rounded it off.
yeah, that's fine. We have Paul Varga here. I don't know where, I didn't look at the audit report, so I don't know what we are above there's typically the Board of Finance tries to work within a 10% to 11% range for keeping funding for undesignated, and then anything above that we generally would move into CNR. What I don't know is whether they've done that and if there's any figure that we're looking at.
We have not done that yet, Chuck. That has not been done for a couple of reasons. One of them is because we're still trying to work out the learning curve bugs for a couple people. It has been discussed. It probably won't get done until, it won't get done this meeting, I know, but maybe early February. There's a couple other things that have come up, unfortunately, that have to be dealt with swiftly for reasons that it just has to get taken care of.
Yep. Paul, do you have any sense of what that number would be? Is it
if I remember, and I'm just pulling out of my head, we're at like 13%.
Oh, good.
So we've got about 2%, give or take, to play with.
Okay.
And as you said,
I did a rough calculation when I got the report, and I concur with Paul. I think I was at about 12.8%.
Okay. So it sounds like there's room between 2 and 2.5% to move into CNR.
Yeah, that would be somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay. So again, if Board of Finance is pretty wedded to the idea of really trying to protect CNR as much as possible, it's just something to keep in mind. So those were the only thoughts that I had on this particular meeting when we're beginning to look at these things.
Yeah, and part of what I wanted to do for the sake of transparency and just for educational purposes for all of us was, well, I realized, this committee is basically dealing with CNR, but I also wanted everybody to be aware of the broad picture of other things that are out there for costs and projects, even though they may be, I know we had talked for years about bundling as much as we could into a bonding package when we got to this situation with the roof and with other things up at the school. So I figured this meeting would be sort of a raw picture. We get a real rough idea and try to include everybody from all different aspects. Now, what I've also been doing, and depending on who you talk to, I've been getting mixed signals about what these ARPA funding realities are and what we can charge off of them. For instance, tonight I had a very long conversation with a friend of mine who's the town manager in Wyndham, Jim Rivers. And they just went ahead and they got approval from their town meeting and everything. They bought a fire truck and several cruisers and a full outfitted ambulance. And which I found interesting because the original package that came out with collectively, which was almost 400 pages long, that put me to sleep several times before I even ventured to get through it. Was so vague you couldn't make it hide in a tail. They came out with a summary recently. They clearly stated that those 3 items I just mentioned were financeable through ARPA. So one of the things that in my conversations, this was just a couple of hours ago, I'm saying to myself, is there a possibility that we designate what we've spent on this new fire truck that we've got in the garage down there that's yet to hit the road with ARPA funding, and then use that money? What roughly we're talking $400,000?
No, the financed amount was like 270 actually, because it was a year late in delivery, the town had already set aside I'd have to pull the file,
Now, is
but
that on a lease?
it is. It's a 5-year lease. Yeah.
Does that lease have a buyout?
I do not know. You'd have to ask Cheryl. She did the financing on that.
Well, we'll take, so anyway, just food for thought. What I was thinking, if that is a financeable resource with ARPA, and we designated that fire truck under those dollars, then that would be a good possibility for the Board of Finance to consider adding to our CNA fund.
The lease payment on the fire truck is 74,250 through 2024-25.
Okay. So anyway, just food for thought. We're looking for a lot. Now, having said everything that I just said, and I want to express my sympathy to Craig, who lost his mother-in-law. Was it today or yesterday, Craig, or
Yeah, Monday night.
Monday night? Very
Sorry
sorry.
to hear that.
Appreciate you taking the time to spend to us, but in that light, and I appreciate you joining us, I'm going to give you the floor and Jim to touch on the school building committee and where you are in your projects and what you put together that's in our projects right now. And then Craig, if you'd like to be excused, we certainly understand.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and be part of the committee, Bill. Thank you very much. Just briefly, for those of you that haven't met me, I'm the new superintendent in Ashford. I've been here since July 1. We did put in 5 proposals into the capital budget. One of them is a new bus, which typically the town and the Board of Education put in every year. We will need that bus next year. We do have one that's on its last go round, but the other 4 are
Craig, just a quick question on that. I noticed I believe you put in 95,000.
correct.
Are you comfortable with that?
I am. The previous number was 90. We're allowing a little bit for inflation and COVID delays, but we think we can definitely get a Bluebird for under 100,000. And we like the Bluebird because they essentially have the Cummins motor and the Allison World transmission. We've had some trouble with international buses in the past. I favor the Bluebird over the international, and that's about what they run, 90,000.
Okay.
That was what we paid for the last one, which the town has actually already paid for. That should be in very soon, actually. But it's typical for Ashford to put in one new bus every year. So they're on this 10-year cycle. The other 4 proposals, go ahead, sorry.
Can I just make a clarification? I just want to be clear and if I'm misunderstanding, please speak up. But is my understanding that the town owns the buses and the town is responsible for purchasing buses independent of the school? So it's good that the school is putting forth what they would like, but it's my understanding that the responsibility lands on the town. So actually, Bill, I believe, and it may be Chris that actually does the actual work of making the arrangements with that bus.
That's correct.
Okay.
Craig's just doing a little homework for us.
That's correct. I was just trying to facilitate, make sure we didn't miss that because we will need the bus. So thank you, Chuck. That is correct. The other 4 proposals are not new. They've been talked about for a few years. One, of course, is the roof, $3.8 million. That's a huge expense, which we'd have to bond out for. There is a window project, phase 2 of the solar project, and also the oil tank. The project that concerns me the most is the oil tank. The oil tank is about 3 years beyond its lifespan. We did have it ultrasound tested last year, but we are even beyond the point where we can purchase insurance, and we'd be 100% liable if we have any contamination as is. Now, technically, the oil tank has to be out of the ground by December 31st of 2023, but based on the fact that our insurance has expired, I would strongly recommend, if I had to prioritize, that the oil tank replacement be our number 1 concern this summer of 2022. The other interesting thing I wanted to know is the roof project. Even though we've been talking about this summer, I want to be honest with the committee. There is absolutely positively no way we are going to get a roof on the school this summer. That has nothing to do with the oil tank. It's simply COVID delays and the inability to get materials to do the roof. So while I would look for a proposal or an approval from Capital and eventually the Board of Selectmen that would allow me to go forward and try to recoup about 73% of that 3.8 million from the state, we wouldn't actually be liable for the funding for a full year from now. So I'm trying to give the committee a heads up on some of the timeline and the funding. So we might move forward over the next few months and approve the roofing project, but it will not be installed. It's a near physical impossibility. That's what we've been told by the roofers already, to get it done this summer. So that would actually be a 2023 expense. But I do need some type of approval from Capital and eventually the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, so that I can move forward with the state funding and try to recoup as much state funding for that project as I could, which hopefully will be in the 70+% range. Jim, do you want to add anything to that?
So that's 100% accurate. We, if we're going to, go to bond for this project, Craig and I are planning on coming to the Board of Selectmen here together very shortly to make that recommendation based on the feedback from the Board of Education and the advisory building committee. And I would agree that we really have no choice but to do this oil tank. That should come as no surprise. It's been on the capital plan for some time. So it does need to be funded. And Craig, if I'm not mistaken, there's actually that's also a reimbursable project through the State Board of Education.
Yes.
So we're looking at funding about 30% of that project. And I know Craig has an estimate from the architect for the fees that it would take to get that project shovel ready. And I think that was around $12,500, if I'm not mistaken. And that's also, 70% of that is also reimbursable as part of the project. And I know he's been doing a little bit of legwork. In his former position, he's replaced a few of these oil tanks, and he communicated also with the superintendent in Wellington that did one 2 years ago. So the numbers he's coming to us with are realistic number. Can hone down a little for an actual estimate. Those are really truly realistic. Anybody have any questions for either Craig or I on, those projects?
Go ahead, Chuck.
I was going
You
to
first.
ask, is this, and I think this is a question for Bill, when we're talking about bonding and, the oil tank, blah, blah, blah. So the oil tank, it sounds like it's leaning towards being a separate project. Two questions come to mind. Do we have to fund the whole thing and then be reimbursed by the state? That's one question. And then the second question is there a mechanism for us to borrow to do that project? And then within the 5-year capital plan, we pay back over, 3 or 4 years, whatever loan process we would go through for what I would consider a smaller yet large project. Just as a reminder, every $300,000 is about $1 million in taxation. So we're looking at a $270,000 oil tank revamp. We may be getting 70,000 back, but 70% of that back, but how and when? So those would be the questions that come to mind sort of in the short term.
So Chuck asked 2 of the questions I was going to ask, and the third one I was going to ask is, when we talked, and he mentioned it earlier, and so did Bill, about the bonding issue, which of these projects is the building committee looking at bonding for? Is it just the roof, or are you folks wanting to combine some of these other projects?
So the discussion we had with this committee last year was that all of the projects for the school as a holistic endeavor are going to take some time for the committee to put together along with the Board of Education. So the plan that we had when we discussed this last year was to potentially bond for the roof and then come back with everything else as one large project, which would be very significant.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, Paul, that's a great question. I think you hit the nail on the head. What I was trying to do early is bifurcate the oil tank from the other three. We could certainly put a bonding project together for the windows, the solar RFP, and the roof, and push that out to 2023. But I'm at the end of the rope on the oil tank. And the thing I want to stress to the committee is, it's, if you look carefully at the documents I submitted, it's a removal and a replacement. So while many people have bantered about solar and geothermal and mini ductless split, I need to heat the school today, tomorrow, next week, and in the intervening 2 years while we move forward with the roof and the solar project. So it is both a removal and a replacement. So to answer your question bluntly, the oil tank could possibly be funded locally out of CNR, and then we could bond out for the rest of the projects. We have a little bit of time for that. But what Jim Rupert and I need is some type of commitment from the Board of Selectmen for the roof, so I can begin applying for the state funding and get the maximum dollars. But that I definitely could separate the oil tank from the other three.
Chuck,
So my question would then be, again, for process, and this is a question to Bill. Is this something that this is a building committee that's an advisory board to the Board of Selectmen, is my understanding. And that this is a town project that needs to be agreed upon. Again, I'm looking for clarification. We're going to have to go to referendum to say, yeah, we're going to spend 4 million or whatever it is. And we're going to have to fund that over, 20 years at whatever, blah, blah, blah. Am I correct on that? So this committee has to put their act together to put up enough information so that the Board of Selectmen then can present their argument to the public before we bond anything, correct?
correct. And my intention is, and I believe, and Jim had touched on it earlier in our discussions, Chuck, that we had last year, at least the ones that I sat in, was talking about this bonding and bundling or packaging as many of these projects. What my intention is doing in the near future is having a conversation with bond counsel and find out the mechanism exactly to do that. And if we were to go into bonding, and I've got a feeling Craig has probably been involved with bonding issues a lot more recently than I've been, but I want to get the parameters of timelines. If we do, I'd like, bottom line, the rates being what they are today, if there's a way we can lock in a rate, even if it's on long term and these projects don't come up till next year or the following year, I'd like to be able to lock in a rate and name all of these and go to one referendum all at once. Whether, I've got to look into the feasibility of that, Chuck, and I intend on doing that.
Okay, great, good, thank you.
And Chuck, you're accurate. We are an advisory committee, and this is our advice, and we have the documentation done to back this up. The architect from Fryer has completed all of that for us. That's why I said, Craig and I would be looking to come and meet with the Board of Selectmen here in the very near future. It is the decision of the school advisory building committee that, the roofing and solar projects should move forward, as well as the oil tank. Again, our priorities are the oil tank and then the roof and solar together. And there's a few things that we need. We need a commitment that the Board of Selectmen is going to seek financing for this project. And the other thing that I can think of off the top of my head is that the Board of Selectmen will actually have to, before we're eligible for state funds, the Board of Selectmen will actually have to choose a building committee that is actually in charge of the project, not just an advisory committee. And, Craig and I have talked about this at some length, and we have some recommendations with regard to that as well.
Jim, just for taking that one step farther, is there an argument for the town to hire a professional to work with that building committee, somebody who's actually an expert at looking out for the client, the town of Ashford, as well as, helping a committee. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, and we've actually, I don't know if you remember this, Chuck, but back when I was on the Board of Education, we actually hired Friar architects, with school funding to actually put together a plan, and we're using that plan. We also had an energy audit done, which is also being used. So these things are being looked at. And I will tell you that the architect that we're working with from Friar has spent way more time with us than he's getting paid for planning the roof project, because he's taken time to talk with Craig. He's taken time to talk with the consultant we have for the solar project. And it's my recommendation that we continue to use his services. And I think for the incidental cost, anything that needs to happen probably can just, be put into the Board of Education's budget for, some consulting fees for him over the course of the next year as we move forward and put together a bigger project, because he's the one that actually, gave us a facility study of the things, the condition of the facility and the things that he would recommend. But the other piece of that is that, we have a building that was built, in I think 3 or 4 different segments, and it's of varying ages. But the way that we use buildings in education today is very different than the way that we used buildings in education when the building was built. So there's more to think about than just, bringing it up to code, making it ADA compliant, making it more energy efficient. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this project, which I think is why, and I think wisely, we talked about, getting the roof project done, because that's a here and now project. We've been keeping it together for quite a few years. Can we keep it together for a couple more if we need to? Absolutely. I think, Craig can tell you from personal experience, he was up on the roof recently. We have a maintenance contract. Our maintenance staff go up there regularly and take care of incidental things. But putting this, holistic project together for the school is going to take some time for a group of volunteers to put together.
Yeah, I think maybe I didn't ask my question clearly. One of my concerns, particularly in a large project like this, is who is over. So, obviously you're a building inspector. You understand that there's only so much that you're able to look at in a project like that. To help advocate, and also I don't know that you are in a position as a building inspector to assess quality, only safety, and things are up to code and so forth. I guess what I'm asking is, do we hire somebody to help oversee the project? And maybe you've already answered it, and it's Friar, who comes in on a regular basis, looks at what's happening during construction and saying, yes, the contractor's doing at least what we expect, if not better.
So I would advocate, and sorry, Craig, you can go in a moment if you don't mind. I would advocate, if we do a large project, that we do actually hire a clerk of the works.
Yep.
With regard to the roofing project, with regard to the solar project, Friar and Mark Robbins are our experts for those projects. And if we do those as a standalone project, I would recommend that, we include, funding in our sources to have them come in periodically and make sure that things are being done in the best interest of the town of Ashford. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yep. Good. Thank you. That answers my question.
Craig, did you have more to add, or did I answer?
No, I would have used the exact terminology, Jim, clerk of the works. And there's no better clerk of the works than the person like Fryer or MHR Solar who actually prepares your RFP to make sure that the RFP is being implemented properly. So that's just sage advice. So I appreciate what you said. I agree. To hire somebody like Fryer to stay on for $10,000 or $13,000 would be a bargain in a $3.8 million project. And who would have more intimate detail of the project than the person we've already paid to prepare the RFP? So I agree completely, Chuck. Just good practice.
Good. Thank
I'm
you.
on board with that same theory. I know when we built the town office building here, we hired a clerk of the works and it more than paid for itself.
Absolutely. It was money well spent.
Well spent.
Good.
Craig, did you
So
have
to-
anything else?
Well, barring the roof, obviously, and the window project, I looked at all the other capital projects. There's, other than perhaps Cadle Rock and the town salt shed, there probably is enough money in this CSR to fund those at a local and then bond out for the larger roofing and window project. And certainly we could schedule that accordingly in terms of time. So I just want to be aware of that. I'm very realistic about what we can get done, what the needs of the town are, what things cost. I appreciate everything Chuck has said. We're just really under the gun with the oil tank.
So the other thing I'd like to mention, Craig, because I don't know whether you forgot, but one of the things that Craig mentioned is that this is an oil tank replacement. And even though we have these pie in the sky ideas about better energy uses for the school, one thing to remember or know, for those of you that maybe don't know, is that based on what happened over the summer with the storms, the boilers are brand new. They've been replaced at the cost of the insurance company. So if nothing else, we felt it made very, very good sense, to replace that oil tank. So if nothing else, even if we, use something like heat pumps to, generally heat and cool the school at some point in the near future, on the coldest of days, those have difficulty and will use
Agreed.
a tremendous amount of energy, to heat the school on the coldest of days. So since we have that new infrastructure, we feel it only makes sense to support that infrastructure, moving forward, keep it in good repair, keep it as that backup system, especially, the building is important, not just to the school for education, but it's also our designated shelter location for the town. So having, systems and redundancy is certainly not a bad thing.
So I agree with Jim. So one of the things I want to go back to, because I don't think it was answered. Right now we have 459,000 in CNR. That oil tank alone is 270,000. Are we, and I'm understanding that there's money being reimbursed, but the question is when. And the other question, and again, that I'm just from the public, so I have no pull on this at all, but I do understand really coveting those capital non-reoccurring funds. I mean, this has been going down for years. It's not been going up. We keep chipping away at it. So I'm hoping that this committee is aware that it would be really nice to end up with at least 459,000 minimum, if not more, left in CNR at the end of this process. What I mean by that is whatever monies are available from last year's audit, that's what we should, and again, I'm speaking for me, that's what we should be working with. So I would want to really understand how the oil tank could be funded, and what kind of monies we could expect back, so that when we are putting it into the 5-year capital plan, part of it is where funding comes from. So like with the fire trucks, we would have, lease to own those payments. If this oil tank is something that we've got to fund, do we actually go out for a loan for that and then get monies back from the state at some point? Or is that monies that comes right away that we can count on and put into our funding source for the oil tank replacement? Having said all of that, absolutely, we should replace the oil tank. So Bill, I think what I'm saying is we need to figure out how it's funded.
I agree. I agree, and we'll certainly look into that.
Right? So that would be a question for Cheryl, right? To say, hey, how can we, and also to understand, maybe if you were to meet with Craig one-on-one or something, to understand what that process is for state reimbursement. So do we have to front that money and then we get it back, or how? Just as long as everybody knows how it works, we can work around that.
We'll try by our next committee meeting, and I'd like to do that sooner rather than later. We'll try
I
to
think,
have-
I think we're gonna do that sooner than that, Bill, because we really want to move this forward.
Right,
Right.
right. I'm even thinking maybe next week we'll do it.
So I'm guessing that one of the things Craig will do early next week will be to consult with Mike from Fryer and call the State Board of Education about how that funding actually works.
Sounds good. I have a question. I had a meeting with one of Craig and Jim's proteges first thing last Friday morning. And I was told the time to test for thermal is when you dig up those oil tanks. Have there been any discussions by the committee that that would be a strategy, or are we looking at some pie in the sky sort of scenario?
You know,
Honestly-
geothermal's been discussed. But you know, geothermal takes up a tremendous amount of real estate. You know, we discussed this, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Craig, at the last committee meeting. And, you know, we talked about the fact that, you know, Bolton High School, where I work full time in the town of Bolton, is geothermal. And that the number of wells that we have there probably take up, you know, close to 3/4 of an acre. And, you know, that school is not that old, and we're beginning to have equipment trouble with the equipment that, you know, that handles all of that. There are some great things about geothermal, and there are some not so great things about geothermal. And, you know, I think the real estate is something that, you know, from Craig's position, you know, he can't afford to lose. You can still have things happening over the top of it, but there's a lot of things that you can't do when you put geothermal in the area where those wells have gone in. So Craig, please expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, Bill, I could not look you in the eye and say that those two projects would in any way be mutually inclusive. In fact, there's no guarantee that, as Jim said, that we could even do geothermal. Even though the school property looks quite large, we have several wells as well as 3 separate septic systems. So the type of geothermal, the amount of piping that would be needed to heat a building this size may not be reality for us. And I'll just go back to something I said earlier. In the meantime, while we're exploring that over the next 2 or 3 years, I still need to heat the building. We don't have propane in that capacity available. We're not on a natural gas pipe. We do have an entirely new boiler room as a result of a lightning strike and insurance claim. Even if we went with geothermal, which, by the way, when it gets below zero is not the most efficient system, you substitute an oil bill for an electricity bill. I would still need some type of backup or oil heat in the meantime. So I do not feel in any way, shape, or form that the removal and the replacement of the oil tank is a bad investment. That's an excellent backup idea while we explore solar and geothermal.
I have a friend of mine that served on the planning committee for the new school in Mansfield, and they're doing geothermal. And I understand they're already running into some unanticipated problems.
So
Go ahead.
Bill, if I could just interrupt 1 second. This particular discussion sounds to me like it's a little more relevant to the other committee, to the school building committee, to kind of sort of pull some of that together. And that what's relevant to this meeting is that oil tank. Because that sounds like there's an urgency to it that we need to deal with. Again, putting on my former Board of Finance hat, one of the things to help the Board of Finance / selectmen sell this to the public is, and Craig can hit me later, is I don't know what is in their unexpended fund, but it could be something where the town and the school, let's say, split the remaining 30%. If the state is gonna kick in 70% at some point, and the town is willing to put in, I think it'll roughly be about 80,000 left over, something like that. If the town's willing to put 40 from CNR and the school's willing to put in 40 from its unexpended fund, these are ways to look at the funding side of this formula to say, look, everybody's standing on their head to do the right thing. So I just want to, again, you haven't chaired this committee before, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that the funding source side of this is also an important thing to help sell what we're doing here. So I also think there might be a discussion between you and Craig about how to divvy up some of that if it's possible. Okay.
So Chuck, I think while you and I are both in this meeting, you having been on the Board of Finance when that fund was created, and me being on the Board of Education when the fund was created, that was a cooperative effort between the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Education. And that the sole purpose for that fund is to support capital projects at the school.
Exactly.
It is not for anything else. That was, the agreement that we had. And I think in good faith, we've used that well to date.
Yep.
This committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance that we use some funds out of that non-lapsing or 1% fund, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
To fund, MHR's work for the solar project.
Yep.
and the work that we've had done recently for the roof project. And so I think that, it's important that we, make sure that history stays with somebody, who's going to be continuing on and carrying the ball from here forward.
Yeah, that's why I just wanted to make sure Bill is aware. I also don't want to throw, it's why there needs to be a discussion between Craig and Bill. Craig may have other plans, other things that he's trying to anticipate. There needs to be a candid discussion between the two of them to figure out whether, that funding is realistic or whatever. That was my only point.
Greg, did you have anything else to touch on?
Just Chuck's comment. I know, Chuck, the Board of Finance is considering expanding the non-lapsing fund to 2%, and they are considering how to use that money. The statute is quite broad. It says it can be used for any educational purpose. However, the local ordinance in Ashford says capital project. So there's a discrepancy there that I think the Board of Finance is working on. Paul, you might want to comment, but
Well, I was just going to say, one of the reasons that we haven't done anything about moving money from the general fund to the CNR, et cetera, is because that's one of the things that's under discussion at the Board of Finance, is that non-lapsing fund for the Board of Education. Because what ends up happening with that does determine how much money is available, additional funds may be available to move to CNR.
So, Paul, is that a one-time thing? You can only move money once? Or, so again, what my question is,
no,
there's two.
No,
you're
there's
pulling
two
from
different things, right? But and I don't want to throw my board under the bus, so to speak, but with so many new people involved, you and I can have this conversation and we both understand what's going on. But it's a lot for people to wrap up, and we've tried to make it and get it through. So we don't want to make a mistake, is what it amounts
very
to.
good.
So we're
Thank
trying
you.
to make it clear. So
Chuck,
and Craig has been really good about it. So
yeah.
Chuck, just an FYI, since taking this position, Craig and I have had a very open dialogue, many meetings, probably more meetings than I can recall any first selectman having with any former superintendents up at the school, with the idea that we're working for a mutual cause, which is the benefit of the town. And I even facilitated a meeting with the chairman and the clerk of the Board of Finance with Craig on an introductory basis to try to lay out some of our goals and to better set up our transparency and communication between the boards. So I'm
Perfect.
confident that those meetings will continue between Greg and I, and we'll certainly report back to this
Yep.
board and as well as my board on what's happening. But I'm really optimistic along those lines.
Great. Bill, are you intending on, for the next meeting, having the 5-year capital spreadsheet with, sort of at least an initial proposal of projects to consider what they would cost? I mean, obviously this meeting's about initial requests, but somebody at some point has to put pen to paper and put those requests in the right line. And we have to start looking at totals and funding and so forth. So, and that's a moving, that moves, we,
Yeah, no, I,
We'll make
We already
adjustments.
started putting that together, Chuck.
okay, thanks.
Chris and I have been working on that already, and I wanted to get a feel and just have an initial meeting with you folks. Our next meeting will be more of a working meeting.
Good, thanks.
First, Selectman Flaherty, could I address Chuck just for a second?
Of course.
Chuck, just an FYI, the non-lapsing fund that you referred to has about $95,000 in it. We have returned via confirmed by audit $174,000 to the town. We would ask that 155,000 of that, which is 2% of our total budget, be moved into the non-lapsing fund, which would be more than enough to cover the oil tank, to answer your question directly. But the town would have to increase 1% to the 2% maximum that's allowed by statute. So I want to be clear about those numbers. Those numbers have stood up through the audit.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I just think, that level of working together resonates really well with the town when you're trying to pass a budget.
Got it. Thank you.
Jim, Craig, anything else from the school side of it?
No, thank you very much.
Thank
No,
you.
I
Just
think we've taken up too much of the committee's time already.
Just to make sure from my end, so basically the big thing, the bus is on there, that's basically the Board of Selectmen anyway, but the oil tank is the biggest thing we need to be concerned about. We know we need to get it done. And the roof and the solar and the windows are possibly something that the school building committee can consider in a bonding package then, that can be done. I mean, it makes kind of sense too. If you're gonna rip the roof off, you can take the windows out and put those in too, but okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, on behalf of the fire department, do you want to just, I know you haven't got much in there, but do you want to address what your proposals are?
Yeah, they told me the sauna bath was a little bit much, so we took it out. But yeah,
I thought it was a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, we thought this year, because we've gotten a lot of things we needed, we wanted to keep this to a minimum. And what we decided on was a Hearst tool. This is a different kind of tool than we've had in the other apparatus in the past. The other ones were completely hydraulic powered. This one is electric powered, and it would go on the ambulance. One of the things we have to deal with during the day is, because we have limited staff, they occasionally will come up to a situation, a crash or some kind of a rescue situation, where they really need to be able to extricate someone quickly. And if we don't have the right pieces of equipment there at the time, there's going to be a delay. We might have to get somebody from mutual aid, from Mansfield or Yukon, and that's not always a good thing. So what this tool would allow is for the 2 day crew people to effect a limited but rapid extrication, if you will, of a patient, let's say in a car crash or some kind of a heavy accident. These tools are relatively lightweight, but they're very flexible, and they have a lot of mobility because they're electric. They can leave the ambulance area and move around with the thing without having to marshal to take the hydraulic lines. We feel that the price of $16,500 is fairly modest for these tools, and it's going to buy us a lot of flexibility in our response during the day. So that's really all we're asking for this time.
Any questions on that? And we're looking at 16,500 on that, correct?
Correct.
So again, Bill, what I would be asking is, again, sounds like a no-brainer. It's something that we should have if they're asking for it. You know, the town, everybody loves the fire department. They do a great job. We want to support them, right? And all of that's great. And I think my personal feeling is this definitely should be in the 5-year capital plan. However, what I would want to know is this thing sounds like, you know, it's a rescue tool and we have American Rescue Funds. It seems to me that we should put it in our 5-year plan, but can we count on our American Rescue plans to actually fund that purchase? And that would just be a question.
You read my mind, and in my discussions with 3 other towns, I'm being told that that is absolutely something that we can probably get covered by the ARPA funds.
So what I'm saying is, let's put it in the 5-year capital plan, yet we say where the funding comes from. It's not coming from taxpayers.
But what my intention in doing, and maybe pie in the sky, but I'm going to work with Chris. And for our next meeting, I'm going to highlight in different colors projects that we have prioritized, and in the color code, things that I think, and hopefully by then, because the information is maturing, I've got a meeting coming up with CCM, hopefully on Friday, about other towns and what they're very comfortable on being approved by ARPA. But anyway, I intend on doing color coding on this chart that we're looking at. And in that color coding, indicating what items I think are probably financeable through ARPA.
Perfect. That'd be great. Good. Thank you. I think it's a
Now,
great
the other
idea.
column will be a color for bondable issues.
Yep.
Another color will be on what I'm looking for this committee to either support or put off for future years.
Yep.
Any other questions on that? Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, Joe, I think you're at it.
Well, I got quite a few projects
Well,
planned.
Now,
One salt shed, that can be bonded. You know me, I'll make our salt shed work for until the school's ready to do a roof. And we can combine it with
Okay.
bonding for that.
we have applied several times through our steep grant applications and been denied, but again, my intention is to try that again. But you know, these are things that we typically, particularly it happens with DPW, we defer. Eventually, we're going to run into a situation where we're talking about severe environmental concerns. And I just want to keep that on the horizon.
So Bill, is your plan then to take this salt shed, which is like, if I remember, 350,000, I think was the estimate. Obviously, that's not something that we're in a position to deal with this year, but your intention is to put it into what would be considered for next year and put a dollar figure with it, just so we hold it as a placeholder?
Don't nail me to that, but yes, that's one of my.
Okay, because that way it's on the 5-year capital committee, and then each year we can kind of move it however we need to. And then, like Joe was just saying, if we do bond it, then we can spread it out over whatever it needs to be.
Exactly.
Good. Okay, thanks.
And I'm wondering if, and again, I'll take direction from bond counsel, but if we're looking at bundling or packaging things, whether that can be one of the items.
Yep, good.
Hey,
Next, we'll move on to a roller. The town's roller is, of course, a 1978. We keep stitching it together every year, making it work, which we can continue to do. But at this time, I got a very good price on a brand new roller from Volvo. And it is something that well, we've already had a failure last year, right in the beginning of paving, where we started putting asphalt out and then had to stop for 2 hours while we found somebody who wanted to rent a roller because ours went down. And I you know, at this time, I think it's an important investment for the town to be able to keep me moving with my projects that I do every year. You know, this machine is $40,000. It can be leased for 5 years. So that would, you know, cut that cost down to, what is that, 5,000 a year?
Plus financing.
No,
yeah.
well, it would be more than that, like,
8 plus finance, yeah.
yeah, plus finance charges,
Yeah, so it'd be roughly like 9,000 a year or something like that.
9,000 a year, yeah. Want to skip on to another one? Going to discuss that?
Move on.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys use it quite a bit in the summertime, Joe, so.
Yeah, we do. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more this coming year. Our transfer station, the entrance gate is not very nice looking. It represents our town. And I have gotten prices from Kent Fence, which is a local contractor in town. His price is was a little lower, but he told me to bump it up because the cost of materials keeps rising. But he still feels he could do that project for about $14,000, which includes fencing from, of course, Upton Road on both sides of a brand new rolling gate fence like we have at our public works garage.
This is an item that I think is a good candidate for ARPA funding. We can look at it from a security perspective. I think that my intention is try to pursue that and see if we can do that through ARPA.
Joe, that's just for the fence though. Would your guys be doing like the cleanup site work, so to
Oh,
speak?
absolutely, Paul. We would do all the cleanup, all the prep work to make the ground acceptable. We're gonna build a brand new stone wall down the road a ways.
Because you said a rolling fence, a rolling gate. I'm like, you can't roll a gate there right now.
No, you can't.
You know,
Okay.
we would do all the land work and all the stone wall building in our off days and spare time.
My intention is, several months ago, we put together a reconvene, mostly an existing committee that we have down the transfer station. And hopefully, once this surge continues to go away, we'll be setting up a meeting and I'm going to be laying out a plan and taking input on perhaps some redesign up there. My thought is regarding traffic flow and perhaps moving a small shed closer to that front gate that one of our staff can watch people coming in and check permits and that sort of stuff. So we'll be going to be working on, I haven't gone over that with Joe much yet, but we're going to be taking a look at a lot of options up there.
Next, we have the walkway in front of the library. Everybody's used it. Everybody knows what it looks like. One of these days, somebody's gonna trip and we're gonna have a lawsuit. I don't know if that might be covered by ARPA. It might. But I think it's time to have it done. I got a price from the people who did the sidewalk across the street. And he will stick to his $32,000 for the concrete pour and demolition and prep of what we have. He said that if we wanted to add heat to it, which would be electric, controlled by a panel that senses what the weather is, so it's not coming on when it doesn't need to, senses moisture, temperature, that would probably cost us around $10,000.
Again, I think that's another candidate for ARPA. It's a safety and a liability concern. John Zulik put that in. Him and I worked on coming up with a design and everything back 28 years ago, and basically hasn't been touched since. The whole profile of it has changed, and it is definitely a tripping hazard. So it's a priority, but I think that we can justify that through some ARPA funding.
Just a question from me, Joe. Any sense of annual ongoing costs to utilize that electric heat?
I wasn't informed of how much it costs to run it. I'm sure it's not cheap, but right now in the condition it is very hard to keep ice from forming on it. We can't shovel it clean. We have a sweeper on the front of our little Steiner we use that has a snow blower and a sweeper. That seems about the best piece of equipment to do it. But we can't switch from snow blower to sweeper back to snow blower. It takes time.
Yeah, not to be a pain in the ass about it, but it seems to me that it would be useful to have some sense, and obviously, who knows, right? But some sense of, kilowatts that we would anticipate, having to, that building's going to have to handle. Are we looking at an extra $350 a year or $650 a year? I don't know.
I can come up with it if I'll go with the fact that we're gonna heat the whole thing. He was saying we maybe only wanted to heat one side of it, or maybe both sides, but 4 foot wide, instead of trying to heat the whole patio.
Yeah, I would not be an advocate for chinsing on it. I would be either we're doing it or we're not doing it.
I will try to find out what an annual cost might be for electrical use by the square foot.
Yeah, that would be great, just to have a sense of it. I just don't know.
Yeah, even an energy amount, not even a dollar, because a dollar amount's going to fluctuate, but just an energy usage number. So like Chuck said, you can figure out how many kilowatt hours are we adding to that bill in the wintertime.
Right.
And of course it depends on this, how much precipitation you get. So one winter you could add nothing, and then next winter. So if you have an energy use, at least you have an idea how much when it turns on, how much that spins that meter.
How many watts of power it needs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be great. And while we're talking about Knowlton Hall, what's the status on the elevator?
You haven't tried it lately, have you?
I have not.
I inherited it not working, and it's continually not working. I've been going steady with Otis Elevator now for a little over 2 months.
Bill, one of the things that I would suggest, and I am not engaged in this stuff like I was before, but I am hearing stuff about that elevator from other people. It seems to me, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is that this is the perfect time, perfect committee to say, look, we have to commit to actually fixing that damn thing, whatever that means. And I don't know what that means. I haven't spoken to those folks, but all I can say is it is a travesty that it doesn't work.
We have the wrong company maintaining it for us.
Yep.
There's a fellow who lives in Coventry, which I had come out and repair it once. He wasn't supposed to touch it, but he knew exactly what was wrong with it and fixed it. And it worked after that for 4 or 5 months without a problem. Also, our librarian doesn't know how to keep her fingers out of the control box. There's another problem. Okay?
So that's a separate issue, right?
But
Need a bigger yardstick.
We're stuck with Otis Elevator till what, 2023, Bill? Is that when
Actually,
their
this year it expires.
This year?
I've got a new contract.
Okay, so their contract expires this year, and I'm going to try to convince everybody to switch to I'll get his name, the guy out of Coventry who maintains Cayman elevators.
So, Joe, are we looking at infrastructure here to really fix that thing for
No,
real?
he says it's
Again, I only
simple.
bring it up. Like if we need $5,000 or $8,000 or something to really
Less than that, Chuck.
Okay.
He says it's simple. They're just screwing me around.
Okay. Very good. I just
They
wanted to make
don't
sure.
understand the operation of the elevator, so they don't know how to fix it.
Okay. All right.
It's all, computers and transistors and
Yeah.
they don't have any idea how to fix it. And I
Okay.
can tell just watching the service guy when he's there, scratching his head, trying to figure out what's going on.
I might suggest that you tell them they fix it or they let you out of your contract.
I was.
I agree
Not a
with
bad
Jim.
idea.
That's what's going through my head. If you can't fix it, we're all done with you.
If you can't fix it, what are we paying you for?
I passed that message along just this week, as a matter of fact.
as
Good.
Chris knows, we've tried to get rid of Otis Elevator and it didn't work.
Okay.
We had
So
lawyers involved.
So
Can't
Joe,
break the contract.
how is that contract developed? Is that, so in other words, I guess what I'm getting at, it sounds like we got our hands tied by accident. Are we looking to do a new contract with somebody more appropriate, but on a shorter term basis?
Correct.
Okay.
The contract we have now was implemented by Ralph Fletcher. Am I right, Chris?
Yep.
Yeah. Chris knows more about the contract part of it than I do.
Yep.
And he signed it for a 5-year term.
Okay. Yep.
And we can't break it.
All
Not
right.
without paying hefty fines.
Okay. All right. Very good. That makes sense.
The other thing I would say, kind of while we're in discussion mode, is that, I think Joe having the equipment that he needs to work on roads is going to be ever more important. There is a ton of infrastructure money that is coming to the state of Connecticut, which, each of
Yeah,
our
we
towns
hope.
will be able to get, portions of, through our local cogs. And, I was on a meeting today with Capital Region Council of Governments, and the amount of money that's going to be coming to Connecticut for, road and bridge projects is staggering. So, I want to make sure that Ashford is in a position that, first of all, that we're ready to get funds when funds come available. One of the things I did in Bolton here recently is I have the plans done for a bridge project, because we expect funding to happen very shortly for the local bridge program. So if we've got bridges that we need to get done that are on town roads, I would suggest that we get ourselves poised and ready for that. But also in the grand scheme of things, 40 grand to give Joe to spend on a roller that will help us maintain our town roads and things of that nature when we are getting an unprecedented amount of money to be spent in the state for local roads and bridges is going to be very important.
Jim, did they give you any idea of a timeline on that?
Pretty soon. And, the governor has hired, former Mayor Boughton to actually be his liaison between the COGS, the towns, CCM, cost, and all the local communities. In fact, he did say that, he would come out and meet with local communities if they felt that was going to be of benefit to them. They want towns to be able to leverage these funds and leverage them quickly. And that funding should be starting to funnel into Connecticut, to the tune of, millions of dollars over the next, actually hundreds of millions of dollars each year for the next 5 years or so.
Joe's eyes just lit up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Jim brought up. I agree with him to give Joe the tools to work with once. I think that's a really solid point. I agree
Maybe I
with
should
him.
ask for more, Chuck. I got a
No.
whole list.
No.
Go on and on. Tony might break that backhoe any day now at the transfer station.
Did the term shovel ready come up, Jim, or they're not using that anymore?
It did not, but especially with the local bridge program, that's where you want to try to have your engineering done and be ready to put your application in the minute those funds become available. And we expect those are going to become available early in the next fiscal year.
I've been in contact with United Concrete because I would not pour a bridge structure in place. I would have it made off-site and then brought in with cranes. So I've been in contact with their engineering department on a few bridges in town. They came out and looked at them. All it would be is a phone call and they would come out and be, it's not going to be free, of course, for them to draw up the prints and come up with the material we need, but it's just a phone call away.
Good.
Craig?
Yeah, I concur. If you'll just indulge me for 30 seconds. I want to say how important it is for Joe to have this piece of equipment. The new backhoe that the town purchased allowed us to not only not interrupt school, but dig an $8,600 trench for free. And actually for $411 in pipe, completely fix our drain system in the boiler room. So, investments like a good backhoe and a roller are well worth it. It's saved the school district tens of thousands already. So I appreciate every piece of equipment Joe can get his hands on. It saves us thousands from contracting out on every single job. So thank you.
Good point.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I got one more down at
Okay.
the,
More.
yeah, down at the Memorial Park. Of course, it's, I look after everything in town. I'm not on Park and Rec, but the secure, let's call it a safety fencing between the playing fields and the parking lot. It was installed, I'm gonna guess, back when the park was built. Every post is rotten. The four-wheelers, the cars, they can access the field without any problem. There's no way to keep them off it. It's not a very expensive job. I got $8,500 down. Kent Fence said it might be a little more because materials went up. He was gonna try to throw another price together for me and has not gotten back to me yet. But that is an important thing to get done because every year we have damage to the ball fields by cars and four-wheelers, and this way we can secure the area better and keep kids safe. If a car ever went out of control down there, roll right through that fence. So something I think is important to do.
On just a side note relating to that, a common conversation that I've had with several first selectmen and a couple of town managers now is upgrades to recreation seems to be a high priority.
It is.
With these ARPA fundings.
Oh, that's good.
So I would think again, that's yet another candidate for, and it's not a big piece of it, but for our ARPA funding.
I agree. Bill, the one last thing, and what gets me to thinking of it is exactly where you and Christine are sitting. I know that the town looked into the health of the various buildings in town, whether it's the firehouse, senior center, the Knowlton Hall, etc. And I know that there was supposed to be a report generated with recommendations on how to move forward. Again, the only reason I bring this up is I think there's the ARP funding would be a no-brainer for some of that stuff. And it seems to me that we should have some sort of line in this 5-year capital committee that begins to address that. Even if we don't have the report yet, which I think we should have, there is no doubt that there are upgrades to some of those buildings, whether it's, filtration systems, whatever. I haven't seen the report. I don't know what they're recommending,
Well,
but
funny
we're
you
going
should
to lose a
mention,
year if we don't have something.
funny you should mention that. I asked Chris to call the company. I didn't even know the name of the company, nor have we had a report submitted yet.
Yep.
Chris had discussions with them today, JES, and they promised us that report will be in hand sometime next week.
Okay, so what I would hope that you're able to do, if possible, Bill, is, take a look at that report, kind of see what you think is reasonable to begin to move forward with. And maybe we try to have some sort of discussion about how to upgrade, if need be, some of those buildings.
Well, I know one of the things that Chris and I have talked about is Knowlton Hall with split units there, both
Absolutely.
downstairs and up in the library. But
Right.
I'm hoping that this report, and again, I haven't seen it yet, when
Yep.
we get in, will reflect that. But we certainly take that seriously. And again, it's an environmental issue. It's a life and safety issue.
Right.
And it is right in with the theme of the American Relief Funds.
Exactly. And boy, it'd really be nice to be able to take advantage of that. So
Yeah.
I know you have a lot on your plate with all of this, but I appreciate you looking into that.
The only other thing I just wanted to touch on is some of the things, and none of this has been carved in stone. There've been a couple of minor allotments. I think out of the $624,000 or so that we've got in the bank already from ARPA, I I asked Cheryl to put a list for me together last month, and we've only committed about $6,500 of that, but some of the things that are on our, so for lack of a better term, wish list right now, we've already earmarked about $1,000 of that 6,500 towards personal protective equipment. We're looking at the broadband infrastructure for the town. We have several roads in town that need it. What we've got is a price of about 63,000. The vendor will add another about 30,000 to that figure to bring broadband accessibility to those homemakers that want to take advantage of that in town. And that's clearly a coverable source for ARPA. Pickleball court restoration at Pompey Hollow Park. We've got a lot of calls. As you know, we've done a survey. We continue to take input. I intend on having a public hearing, but that's come up and been supported by a number of people. It's a recreational use. It falls in line exactly with the theme that we're hearing from other towns. Restoration of the Pompey Hollow Park trails, as well as the Ashford Memorial Park trails, keeping with that recreational theme. The radio purchases for the Public Works Department, the fire department, and I've been talking to Craig about coordination with buses to get on the 7080 new band that the state is offering. We've been doing testing. I know the fire department has tested. We got a couple of portable units on loan from the state. We tested for cross town benefits of it, with the exception of just a couple of areas that we're not surprised still have poor reception, but we're going to be going ahead with that. That's under ARPA also. The reporting fire upgrades, Paul, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that for the system. Is that for the fire marshal?
It's through the fire marshal, but it does serve the fire department too. Hi, Tom. I'm not stepping on your toes. Actually, I just worked with Charlie this evening to finish up some paperwork on it.
Okay.
So what basically, to real quick, the reporting system that the fire marshal uses, the software company sold out because Microsoft no longer supports that platform. So the new company that purchased it, moved it and migrated it all to their software system, which is Microsoft supports everything or doesn't support anything. So when they did that, there's some changes that we have till the end of this year, or the fire marshal has till the end of this year. However, several places have already started requiring the new software because they changed the reporting format. So the way that works for the fire department is we're the data provider, if you will. We input the data for the incidents. The fire marshal is the required reporter to the state. So it's kind of a joint venture. So the fire marshal's office, that comes out of his budget for the software, but the fire department is the one who actually does all the data input for him. So that's why we're involved on the department side, because we also use the same reporting the same software company. We use their software for our EMS reports, which is fire department only. So there's a little bit of a crossover.
Okay. And the only other thing on this laundry list is Tremco House rehabilitation. And it's something we're working on. We contracted with the engineer, the architect, Bob Hurd from Vernon, that did the original study on that. And we were supposed to get a report before the end of December. He got sick and got laid up. It's been promised to have it before the end of this month. And what we asked them to do, because our understanding was the project in its entirety was in the area of 300,000, which may have increased now because of inflation or whatever, but we've asked them to try to break that up so that perhaps we can bring it to the town and consider it over a 3 or 5 year plan and break up those costs. The Board of Selectmen hasn't taken a stance on that yet, other than we're anxiously awaiting that report to get a better idea of how that's going to go. That's about all I had, folks.
If I can make just a couple of quick comments, Bill.
Sure, Jim.
We'll start with the software for the fire marshal and fire department. If you're looking at ESO, we've instituted it in Bolton, and we are not as happy with it as we thought we were going to be. But if that's what you're sold on, you probably want to talk with TN and see if you can piggyback onto the
Already did. Yep,
contract. Save
already did.
a ton of money.
We're already there.
Yep, already there.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it is not as robust as we thought it was going to be.
You're the first person I've heard complain about it, actually, because we use it,
Yeah.
the EHR portion for the EMS stuff. So,
Yeah, I know that Dick Palmer in Wellington is not super happy with it either, but just make sure you go into it with your eyes wide open. The other thing I would say is with the broadband stuff, Bill, that is one of the things that we will be getting money from the feds on. That is one of the pieces of the infrastructure bill. In order to make your ARPA funds go further, what I would recommend and what probably your local COG will recommend is that you apply for those funds, through that federal aid program that's going to come, and you use your ARPA funds to pay for your share, which I think is 20%.
Oh, wow.
So,
Good to
right.
know.
So then you make your ARPA funds go that much further, rather than spending the whole 63 out of the ARPA funds. You're only spending 20% of the 63, and you still get the same end result. And that makes your funding go further to do other projects. But that's a specific carve out in that infrastructure bill.
Is your COG doing any of the administration of your grants for the ARPA funds?
They will help.
Okay, because my predecessor, we've contracted with our COG, and I just haven't got it clear in my mind what they're doing for us. We're kind of getting mixed signals from them. So we're looking into that anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a way to stretch those funds even further.
That's an excellent idea. I appreciate you
Great.
calling that. Perfect. Anything else, folks?
You forgot Cato Rock.
Cattle Rock. You want to touch on that, Chris?
Sure. Department of Economic and Community Development put out that a remediation grant round will be opened in July. We applied last year and did not get one, and we believe it was because we did not own the property. We now own the property. The engineering firm that we're working with has upped the amount they think we'll need to do the complete remediation. And this will be between the two towns of Ashford and Wellington, who are joint owners. So we're putting in for 300,000, and hopefully we get the grant. It's totally reimbursable. So it's a wash.
So, Chris,
Yeah.
the hope would be to have this in this year's 5-year capital plan. And again, my same question to the oil tank, is this something where the town has to front the 300,000
Yes.
and then it's reimbursed?
Yes, it's a reimbursable.
Okay, so we would just have to have those monies on hand and then expect reimbursement within some period of time.
We usually, for the phase 1, phase 2 studies, we had to submit quarterly for reimbursement for expenses.
Yep. Okay. So Bill, we would be talking to Cheryl possibly about how to front those monies, where that would come from. And then, expect reimbursement. So again, sort of are we willing to gamble CNR?
A lot of gamble.
That's a heavy amount of resources. So just where is a reasonable place to have that money come from?
At this point, I'm not, but I'm certainly open for suggestions and we'll be talking further on it.
Yep. So, yeah, just so that we know where that money comes from. Obviously it's coming back, but it's gone for a while, right?
Right.
Well,
I'm
that's a
looking at the
grant
21,
application though.
22, and I believe it came from CNR.
Okay.
You know,
But
and it
Chris,
shows-
didn't, correct me
shows
if
it
I'm
was
wrong. Yeah, we had, previously, the town had applied for the grant and was denied. Is that correct?
That's right, because we did
Okay.
not own the property at that point.
So, right, so we're literally, Chuck, your verbiage is correct. You're gambling CNR because there's no guarantee that that grant's gonna come through.
Well, we wouldn't start the remediation until we
Till we
couldn't
got the
start
grant.
remediation
Okay,
until
Yeah.
we were awarded the grant.
Okay.
Yep. So I would just want to, as a Board of Finance member, if I was there, I would want to understand how that 300,000 is dealt with. So let's say, it's in the 5-year capital plan, the grant is issued, all that's great. I just want to make sure I know where the money, where it comes out of, which I think Chris is saying would be CNR, and when we would expect it to come back, so that we're not, we're asking a lot of this CNR fund with this particular group of requests. So again, we've got 270 on the oil tank, 300 here, there's 570, and we've got 459 in there right at the moment. So I just want to make sure it looks like we can juggle all of this, but we need to know how.
So I mean, I would advocate, when the Board of Finance looks at, the school's 1% fund or, non-recurring fund, that they do up that to 2% so that the oil tank can be taken out of that money. And then 70% comes back and goes back into that fund. And, if anybody thinks it would be helpful for me to go to the Board of Finance meeting and say that, I'd be happy to do that as long as I don't have a meeting for the town of Bolton that night.
I believe they were going to consider it, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong. I think they were going to discuss it further tomorrow night, but because of
actually,
the budget,
it is not, I haven't sent Craig an email. It's not on the agenda for tomorrow night because of the Board of Selectmen's request for the authorization for the DPW. So it'll be on the agenda for the February 10th meeting, I believe, along with the CNR monies. So.
All right, folks, anybody have anything else? I appreciate your time, and Craig?
I just wanted to throw a shout out to Tom. Tom, it's great to meet you. I think a battery powered Jaws of Life is a brilliant idea. I don't think anything on this list is a pie in the sky wish list. This is all reasonable to me. You're an amazing group. I'm happy to speak with you all. I'm sure we can use our ARP monies and non-lapsing funds correctly to relieve the burden on the taxpayer. So I think, very honest, frank conversation tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks,
Thanks.
Craig.
Thank you, folks.
Bill, do we have any sense of when the next meeting is?
Well, what I'd like to do is do it next Wednesday night if possible.
You feel that gives you enough time to kind of get it all organized?
Probably not, but I'm going to make an effort to make it.
Very good. I'll
At least
be
he's
there.
honest.
Wednesdays are good.
All right,
Yeah.
very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks.
All
Have
right.
a
All
good
right,
night.
guys, have a
Good
good
night.
night.
Good night, Joe.
Good night. It's good to see everybody.
Likewise.
Good night.
Thank you.